Hello everyone, thank you so much for stopping by. What I'm basically gonna do is I'm gonna focus the first half of this whole video to demonstrate how I got the tone using the Misha Mansoor plugin, and then the rest of it will be me going through how I mixed everything and mastered everything so you guys could get some insight in exactly how I go about making these demos. Now, this demo in particular only took about 2 days to record, to mix and master. So before I begin, I'm going to just let you know there's going to be a timestamp in the description below because it's going to be a lengthy video. So just look down in the description and you guys could pick what you want to see and what you don't want to see. So you guys don't have to like fish through what this fucking video has to offer. So there you go. You're welcome. So first things first, let's hear how the actual guitars sound by themselves with all the processing going on. Me personally, I think this is a very tight tone. There's no excessive frequencies popping out. Overall, when I first got the plugin, the first thing that I noticed is that it's very well balanced and it does cut a lot of the necessity and work needed to create a good guitar tone. So if you're looking to just do quick demos or something that is really easy to use and gives you a good tone right off the bat, this is definitely a plugin that you should look into. So this is going to be the plugin. You're going to have clean, crunch, and lead. Clean is obviously a very low gain to no gain type of amp sim. The crunch is mid gain, lead is high gain. Now for rhythms and stuff like this, I actually like utilizing a medium gain amp sim because I think if you add too much gain, you lose a lot of the clarity. If I am using a high gain amplifier, quote unquote, I will use a very low gain setting because things like boost pedals, like this one, which is an overdrive, that is included in the actual plugin. So there's 3 stages of distortion. They're going to be represented by this thunderbolt. So you can see here how it's just the outline, it's empty. That's going to be a certain type of gain. Then it's going to be half filled, which is a little bit more gain, and then the full thunderbolt, which is going to be obviously full on gain. So you have 3 different types of gains that you could fuck with, which is really cool. Now for this particular tone, I took off some of the low end, left the mids by themselves. The high end, tapped it just a little bit to the right. The tightness. So the tightness, to me, I haven't read the manual, so I could be mistaken in regards to what each of these things do. But I just use my ears when I first get these plugins. Now, the tightness makes everything tighter, and by that, what I think it's doing is taking some of the low end and kind of taking it down a little bit so the clarity of everything above a certain frequency is able to kind of breathe more, and there's not so much low end kind of mushing everything in the tone. The saturation is a form of light distortion. I don't want to even use the word distortion, but just a little bit of hair in it adds a little bit of saturation. Now the per, for what again I think it's doing, for what my ears tell me what they're doing, it seems like there's like a band or a bell going across the low end of the actual tone, and it kind of shifts where the low end is going to really kind of be resonating. You know what? I don't know why the fuck I'm just... Let me show you. So here we go. So you can tell that when you have it all the way to the bottom, you lose a lot of low end. And when you move it, even when you have it at 100, you don't really hear the low end. But I found out that somewhere between here and here is where you hear the actual curb. So let's hear that. Like right there is a frequency where you hear the woo. And right there, it cleans up. So I picked this gain stage because I basically liked it. What I'm gonna do is we're gonna turn this off so you could hear how it sounds without the actual drive pedal. So this is how the actual setting of the amp sounds without the overdrive going into it. So what you can tell right off the bat is that this drive is actually taking a lot of the low end and really giving a lot of clarity to the tone. So let's go back and forth and we'll see what this actual drive is doing. So you see, it really tightens everything, and it adds a certain sense of clarity that you would usually get with an EQ or something along those lines. But the way I went about it is there's multiple tack settings here, and I went with 5. Why? I honestly didn't really hear that much of a difference between the settings, but 5 just did something to me that 4 through 1 just didn't. Now the volume is going to be basically like how loud or how much you want the actual pedal to amplify the signal. Brightness, now this pedal is very bright if you get a little bit too excessive with that particular knob, so I took that down a little bit because the tone by itself is already pretty trebly. So taking that down a notch just added a certain sense of clarity that I liked. In drive, I just have it about 20. There's enough distortion coming out of here that adding just that little bit more just gives it a little bit more punch, a little bit more clarity, a little bit more balls to it, without oversaturating it. So then you have what it clearly says, top end. Now this is for the presence. Have it all the way cranked up. So let's see how that sounds. So you can tell how that completely sucks everything from the high end. Okay, and then the range. So this basically lets you know exactly, I consider it as an equalizer. So you know when you have a Q or you have a bell, right? The range would have to be the smaller the range or the greater the range. So you're able to kind of group other frequencies together, and then you're able to edit against that. Channel volume, I just leave it at 50 because I didn't really find a need to fuck with it. Now the harmonics, I love this little knob. It does so much. So let's see how that sounds. Now again, I'm pretty sure there's some fancy description for it. I haven't read the fucking thing, but I liked it at that position, so I'm gonna leave it at that position. Compressor. Compresses the sound. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? There isn't much of a difference when you go into a distorted tone. You mainly notice the compressor more on the clean channel, but I just wanted a little bit of squeeze, so I just gave it that little nudge to kind of give the actual tone some character. Now, for the cabinet section, I absolutely loved every cabinet here. There's a lot of plugins where they offer you a shit ton of cabs, but the majority of them sound like shit. Very hissy, very mid-gained. I feel like every cab here has actually has something to offer, and it's very musical. Now, just for the sake of not making this a 30, 60, 2-hour video, I'm not going to go through all the cabinets, but what I can say is that if you're thinking about getting this, you can also use your own IRs if you have your own sounds that you love and you want to just use with the actual plugin. But the cabinets that come with it are very awesome, and you get forced selection of microphones, which also, again, very, very musical. There wasn't a microphone that I basically thought was too harsh or too dull. Now the effects, there are multiple effects here, and by multiple I mean 3. Now you can consider that a good or a bad thing. I consider it, this is all you need, baby. This is all you need. Delay, chorus, and reverb. Now the delay is amazing because you do get stereo delay, so you could get that very wide type of delay. So then from there you do get a chorus, which I did use in the other track, but anyway, we'll kind of review these effects when I'm actually using them. So moving on, we're gonna go to the EQ. Now I love this EQ because it's very musical, it's not harsh, and there's not too many settings where you're just like, oh my god, what the fuck do I do? You know what I'm saying? I took away -2 at 200 and -2 at 500. This gave the actual tone a lot of needed clarity. So I'm going to play with and without. So you can tell that it really controls that bottom end. Now, we do have a designated compressor at the end of the signal chain, but it doesn't really need it. To be honest with you, the signal is already compressed enough. The only time that I would use it would be for cleans. Okay, guys, so that is basically how I went about utilizing the Misha Mansoor Toneforge to get this particular tone. I didn't go too in depth, but then again, I also didn't want to make the video longer than I already know that it's going to be. If you do want some more in-depth knowledge or just have any questions in regards to how I went about using this particular plugin, hit me up on Instagram. At this point in time, I'm going to go in depth in regards to how I mix the entire thing, from drums, guitars, bass, and little nuances that I also have in the mix. So, sticking with guitars, the thing that I did once I got this particular tone, what I actually have going on here is the Toneforge Misha model, and guess what? The only other thing in the signal chain for the guitars is going to be a multi-band compressor, and that's to control the low end. So you can just tell just how much low end is actually being controlled just by this one multi-band compressor. And that's it. The majority of the tone is literally coming from just the plugin. So there's no excessive actual processing going on after the Misha Mansoor Toneforge plugin. We're going to move on to, let's do drums. Now drums, I am utilizing, as you'll see here, Easy Drummer 2 to be exact. What I do here is I go into all my outputs and I make sure that everything in the mixer of this particular plugin can be routed out to its own channel, which you'll see here. So when I go about mixing drums for demos, I don't really like to go and do too much. Because, you know, this particular Easy Drummer sounds great off the bat, and I'm all about simplicity and effectiveness. I'm trying to get as efficient as possible with as little work as possible. So I really didn't do much for the actual drums. The only thing that I did is going to be from the top down is as follows. The kick drum. Okay, so we're going to do this. And let's just hear the drums by themselves with all the processing. The kick by itself. So like I stated, I have this routed to its own channel. So this is the kick by itself. Now what I have in terms of equalizers is going to be a boost at 504. I just felt it needed a little bit of body in the mid range, and you might not even be able to hear how much it adds to it because it's very subtle. It's only about almost 3 dB. So let's hear how that sounds. Just adds a little bit of body. Okay, so from there, I actually create an effects track. So it's basically going to be a separate track that I feed the signal of the kick drum to, thus creating basically a track where I'll be able to add effects or do any type of editing to the kick drum without changing the original feed of the kick drum. If I actually bring that all the way down, you'll actually hear what I'm doing to the processed version of the feed the kick is giving. So you can see how it's just the very low end of the actual kick. Now, what I did is I used this plugin called Fabfilter Saturn. It's actually called Saturn, but the people that make it is from Fabfilters. And it looks like this. It's really a saturator, but the way you can use it is like an equalizer. And I'm pretty sure I could have achieved this with a normal equalizer, but I just love how this one kind of works, and it does add some saturation to it if you want. At this point, I'm only giving about 20% worth of saturation to this. Let's actually hear how that sounds with and without. So you can hear how it actually adds a little body to it. Let's go to a faster kick part. So you can hear how it really kind of beefens up the actual kick. So what I basically did is I bring it all the way down, and then I just mix it in to taste. So if I go overboard with it, right, it just becomes too woofy. So that's where I decided to keep it at minus 9.5. So that is the kick. That is literally all I did to the kick. Now the snare. I do the exact same thing to the snare. So again, it routes it from the actual plugin into its own track. So what I did here is I added some EQ, and I actually added some body to it by boosting at, I believe, 200 hertz. If that is 200 hertz. I hope it is 200 hertz, or I just sound like an idiot. But I boosted there, and I boosted 3 dB. Now, without, sounds like this. Oh, sorry. And with. So you can see how it adds body to it. So that's what I did in terms of equalizing, and again, I created a separate effects channel where I route the signal of the snare into this particular track, and from there I add reverb, and I also add a compressor. But with the reverb, what I'm looking to do is to add that room type of sound to kind of add that intensity to the actual snare. So without and with. From there, I actually add a compressor because I like to compress the actual reverb so that the tail ends become more pronounced in the actual sound of the snare, kind of giving it that smack. So with and without. That clicking, bro. My computer right now is like. Anyway, with and without. So you can see how the compressor really brings out the reverb and kind of makes it more present. And literally, I shit you not, guys, that is all I did for drums. From there, all the cymbals and toms and everything was left the same, and I just basically mixed to taste inside the plugin. So nowadays, you don't really have to do much in order to get a great guitar tone, bass tone, drum tone. You just got to really use your ears and not overthink everything. Just make your strategic moves, make things sound to where you want them to sound like, with very minimal processing, as you can see here, and just roll with it, guys. Don't make your life so complicated. All right, so that's basically drums. No external compressors, no fancy shit, none of that shit. Okay, so bass. Now, for all my demos that I do, I actually don't use real bass. I use a plugin bass. And it's not even a dedicated bass plugin. It's this thing called Expand. And it looks like this. Bow. This is a multi-effect synthesizer fucking plugin, but a while ago, I just hated fucking tracking bass because I used to do things in a lot of different tunings. I only have one bass, which is like from like 1992, and it's just fucking rusty, and I got it for free because my friend didn't even want it. It's just a horrible bass. And I was so tired of like trying to find a good bass and borrowing basses that I just ended up just using MIDI bass. And up until this day, nobody has even fucking called me out on it. Nobody. So whoever like, oh, he's using MIDI bass, you motherfuckers ain't even notice. Anyway, so here it is. Okay, so it doesn't sound too bad. It clearly sounds like Mario is like slapping that shit, but it's all right. Anyway, so the processing that I did is bow EQ, my friends. EQ is your friend. I added some 4 dB at 100 hertz to add some body to it. So with and without. God, I feel so bad for my computer right now. So again, adding some body, taking away some of the unnecessary frequencies that we really don't want to shine in this particular tone. From there, multi-band compressor. And that's, again, to control the low frequencies without getting too overbearing. And with MIDI bass, especially when you're utilizing a plugin that isn't strategically for bass, it could get very bass heavy. So I just use this to control the actual low end. So with and without. So it actually sounds better without it on, but in the context of the mix, it does add too much bass. So that's why your ears might actually gravitate towards with it on, but in the context of the mix, it really does all the difference. So once again, I create a separate track to basically manipulate the original bass signal that I'm creating with all these effects, and I'm sending it into an effects track to further manipulate. Now what I do here is I create the distortion, and now by that I mean I'm going to turn it off and on, and so you guys can understand what I'm talking about. So that distortion type of sound, it's actually coming from the effects track that I created here. So once again, the signal from this particular bass is going to go into this track, and we're going to further add it. Now, the thing that I am utilizing, again, is going to be the Fabfilter plugin, and I'm once again just isolating the frequencies that I want. In this particular case, is going to be these frequencies right here. So I think this tells me, yep, so from 500 and on, I'm working on right now. So if I take it away, oh, sorry. Let me do this. Let me just 15.4. So let's take away 15.4 so we could just hear the frequencies that I am utilizing. So it's basically the whole bass, right? But then when I mute the frequencies I don't want, bow, and I only get these, this is what I get. So my train of thought behind this is basically I want, what was it, 15.4? So I basically want the actual bass to come from the original signal, and then the treble distortion sound, I want it to come from this affected track. Right? So you can see how you're getting the bass end from the clean one, and then you're getting the grit and ballsiness of it from this treble E distortion type of thing, right? So guess what? Now I'm not getting the distortion from this. I'm only utilizing this as like an EQ. I'm actually getting the distortion end of it utilizing Misha Toneforge. So this is the tone that I actually got for the actual bass. So on and off. Let's actually do this. Let's take that away. Sounds kind of silly without. So without going too in depth, you can just glance at what I did. Here you go. Here you go. There it is. Do I do any EQ? I do no EQ, and I use no compressor, and I use no effects. Just straight up. That's the cabinet with that microphone, amp settings, and the overdrive. So from there, I actually do some EQ, and I take away this very harsh frequency. And you're going to hear when I turn it on and off. So it's like air and just all this nastiness that you don't want in the actual tone. Got rid of that shit. I said, boy, bah. So let's bring that back up. And that's literally it in terms of bass. Together. There you go. So that is what I did for drums, guitars, and bass. The only thing that we have yet to cover is this little thing right here, which is just some ambience that I added towards the end to add some character to the final riff. Right? So what that is basically me just tremolo picking those two notes. And this is actually recorded mono, which is why you don't see left and right. It's just straight up one track. And since I wanted to utilize the actual effects of the Misha Toneforge, what I did is I created a bus to a separate stereo track, which is where I included the actual Misha Mansoor plugin. That way, when we get the chorus and the reverb, we get it coming out of both the left and right. Whether if I would have just done it inside of the actual mono track, it would have been dead center. So none of the spread of the reverb would have actually come about. So this is the setting that I have. I'm actually utilizing a clean tone. Let's actually turn these puppies off, which are the effects that we'll get to. But by itself, it basically sounds like this. Let's actually turn this off. Right? So the first thing that I did with this is actually go to the effects and add some chorus. Now, the way that I actually altered the chorus, it kind of gives the tremolo picking a sense of being twice as fast. So check it out. Right? Then from there, these are the settings, you know, blah, 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 blah. Don't want to get too into it. Then the reverb. Now, I absolutely love this reverb. It is so lush. It is not obsessive. You can make it obsessive. Is that excessive? It's not excessive. Obsessive. What the hell? You can make it excessive. You could go for the crazy shit, you know, landscape type of new age sound. But you can definitely get a great tone out of it. And what I got was... Oh, let me turn it on. Right? So I liked what that added to the actual tone. From there, it just added a little bit of gain and clarity with the overdrive, and pow. So you can see how the actual pedal kind of brings it to the forefront and adds that extra little bit of gain to kind of make it cut through. And that's basically everything. From there, I actually just give it a little compressor to kind of, once again, bring out the actual reverb, kind of bring it to the center. So with and without. Oh, sorry. So you can tell that with the compressor, it actually kind of lowers the sound of the tremolo picking and kind of fuses it with the actual reverb to kind of make everything a little bit more lush and more controlled. Now, in terms of the actual tracks, that is all I do. Now, we're going to go in regards to what I do in mastering. Okay, so looking at my master bus, what you're going to find is CLA mixed down stereo, which is basically just a compressor and saturator. But what I actually want to focus on right now is going to be the Fabfilter's Pro L, which is a limiter. Now, what I like to do is actually mix in conjunction with this limiter in my master bus from the get. So once I'm done recording and I got everything pretty vaguely mixed. Now by vague I mean I just have things sounding pretty decently, but no time has really been given to the actual mix at that point. I just kind of get my volumes to where I think they're generally going to sit, and then I slap this fucker on there. Now the reason that I do that is because I like to mix in conjunction with what the limiter is actually doing to my mix. Oftentimes people will actually spend all this time in their mix getting it to sound amazing, and then once you slap a limiter or any type of mastering processing, it's going to dramatically alter the mix. And what that makes the person do is have to go back to their mix and have to alter things here and there and then try it again into the actual mastering bus. So I like to avoid that whole thing. I like to get that volume in there, see how everything reacts, and then tailor the actual volumes of everything to that particular compression. In this case, it's going to be the limiter, right? So these are the settings that I have, and with, out, and with. So you can tell that this is exactly where all the volume is coming from. And now, from there, once I basically get everything sounding the way I want to with the limiter, I slap this fucker in front of it. I don't know why I call my plugins fuckers, but I put this into it, and it's one of my favorite plugins because it just makes everything sound amazing. So you actually have bass and treble alterations that this plugin can give you, and they sound amazing, and usually I would use them, but because I wanted to retain the actual tone of everything, I just opted out to not even using them. The only thing I'm really using this plugin for is for compression and for a little bit of saturation. So without, so you can tell that actually kind of molds everything together, brings everything to the forefront, and the saturation, which is described to as drive, adds just a little bit of saturation to everything to kind of give it that aggressiveness to it. And that's literally it. That's everything I use in this particular session for my mastering. And like I stated, it just kind of goes back to stating that I want to be as efficient as possible and creating these mixes to sound decent. I'm not saying this is a fucking amazing mix, but it gets the point across, and it got the point across utilizing very little amount of processing from the mix side, even the mastering side. So guys, in conclusion, please let me know if you've enjoyed this video in the comment section below. Please subscribe, like, help the channel grow, and if you don't want to be seen here, you can actually DM me in my Instagram, which is also included in the description below. So guys, I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.